So welcome. In today's episode, we're out here in our electrical room, specifically our solar electrical room. So we built this room specifically to house solar related equipment and to do tests. We test portable power stations, everything on the channel. But today's video, we're going to double up my Orient power system. So I've been running this 6500 watt Orient power inverter and one of their 5.1 kW batteries for quite a while, and it has earned my trust. I'll go ahead and start the video out by saying the only thing that I have seen out of this setup right here is a tiny little bit of light flicker on just a few specific LED lights in the shop. Like none in here, none of my main shop lights, like a refrigerator LED light and a few things like that. And that's only when this is pulling directly off of my solar panels. Keep in mind, my shop has multiple lights, multiple fans, a window AC unit, a full-size refrigerator, a full-size deep freezer, and it has another deep freezer that I converted to an ice maker. And that one runs a lot more than a standard deep freezer. So you're talking comparable wattage pull out here to my house. Actually, around the clock, this pulls slightly more, not counting running big things like washers and dryers and other stuff. But whenever you size your system, we'll talk about that some today. You don't just do one battery to get through one night because, well, occasionally we'll get cloudy days or rainy days and I need additional battery power. Otherwise, it's swapping back over to the grid in order to pull power from there to charge the batteries or to just send extra power out to the shop where it's needed. Also, with this setup, you can only get 120 volts. It's a 6500 watt, 120 volt inverter, but these can be split phase to 240, which is what we're going to do today. That's what your common American household power is. And you can even three phase these. I also have decided I want to make this my battery wall over here. So I'm going to be taking this battery up, putting the second inverter right beneath this. That'll make all the wiring easy to get over to my main panel, have all my programming right here together. And then we can put up to, well, probably close to 30 kilowatt hours of batteries over here if we space them correctly. My ultimate goal is to get to 4 of these with 20 kilowatt hours. Then we can expand out later as we need. In full disclosure, I paid out of my pocket for what you're seeing me installing today. The original equipment here was given to me by the company to do a full review and test, which I've been doing. I liked it enough that I decided to put my money where my mouth is and just spend a few $1,000s of our own money in order to double the system up. But with that said, if you use the links down in the description to purchase any of this, if you like what you see here, I do earn a small commission, and that's how I earn income, and I'm able to do this for a living. So thanks if you use those links. So I could take the front panel off here. This is the same for connecting or disconnecting like we're doing right now. There's a few little plugs that you can unplug. And now this is ready to be removed. By the way, this is all 5/8 plywood I mounted on the walls in this particular room so it can handle weight of batteries like this. Keep in mind, I'm about to have 220 pounds on this wall alone. But I also put extra studs in here, did some extra nailing, and 5/8 plywood should be more than sufficient to hold all the different mounting screws and lag bolts that we're going to put in on this as well. Holy moly! All right, so let's have a quick discussion on wiring real quick, and this is my time to caution you. If you're not comfortable with wiring, you need to hire a certified electrician. So if you look in on the bottom side of this inverter right here, it's going to be identical to this one, by the way. I don't know how well you can see up in there, but on this side, that is my input side coming from the main panel. That's how you grid tie these for grid input. On this side is your output side. That is what you would send out to feed a panel. If you're in true off-grid mode, you're not going to worry about input, you're just going to output from the system. The reason you would want input coming into a unit like this is they are programmable to work many different ways. So you can set this inverter up to where it'll pull grid power in the event that the batteries run really low, there's not enough solar input, etc. You can have this swap over and pull off of your main panel. So you can see over here I have my battery lugs tightened in. There's the red and black, and they are color coded up top so you can make sure you have them going to the right area. On this side is my MC4 solar connectors, and this inverter does come with a little piece that you can put in there and actually have these to where you can hook up some conduit. Down the road, as we finish messing with this system and kind of getting it where I want, we'll do some of that. Right now, I want to remind everybody everything is temporary. So please excuse the wiring. I am quite particular about the way wiring looks, but I have so much going on here because I'm a review and test channel. So not only do I have transfer switches hooked up over here so I can backfeed in small generators and portable power stations for testing, and then we have our full system here. So I have a lot going on, a lot more than the average person is. So remember the output I was just discussing that I have coming from this inverter and this inverter. There is 2 white outs, which is your neutral, and there's 2 line outs, which is the blacks, and then you have 2 ground. So those 2 lines, my 2 hots, run into this panel here in 2 different locations, and they go to a double pole 50 amp breaker. Because a main panel has 2 phases coming in from the outside, what's split phase, single phase but split phase. So every other breaker on your panel flip-flops in between those phases. So I've got a line coming in off of this unit, a line coming in off of this. We're about to hook them together and make them communicate so they support 2 different phases, or split phases, what I really need to be calling this. That's why we have a double pole breaker in here. Now those neutrals and grounds, they all land on the neutral and ground bar on either side, but this is where I really want to caution people. My setup is quite unique and different, and we're very temporary at the moment. This is my main panel out here. Currently, I have a meter right on the back side. This is my first means of disconnect from the grid, and I'm still grid tied right now. So that means all neutrals and grounds are bonded. They land together on the bars on either side. You can see this bar right here connects both landing bars on either side, and you see that green screw right there? That is actually bonding my neutral and ground. That's why you see going all up and down this bar, I have grounds and I have neutrals tied in together. You can do that on your first means of disconnect. Inside of these inverters, they already have from the factory neutral and ground is bonded, because in off-grid mode, this is your first means of power, your first means of disconnect, everything. So everything's bonded here. And what most people would do is run those 2 hots out from 2 inverters, the neutrals and grounds, to a sub panel somewhere and have your critical loads in it. You're not even worried about the grid, for example. Now the National Electric Code says in your sub panel, which comes off of these right here, your neutrals would be on one bar, your grounds would be on the other. We would not have that bonding screw or that bar connecting the 2. You always separate neutrals and grounds. Long story short, what could potentially happen is you could wind up with current on the ground that runs back, well, a very short run through the wall. It's all protected. So there is a potential for current on the ground. Now, a certain type of situation, so I understand that. And if your wire's protected, not only is mine sheathed and protected, but it's also in conduit and connectors, really the risk isn't there. But if you're going to hook these up to a panel, know that neutral and ground is bonded here. You need to separate neutrals and grounds on your other panel. Now my future plans is to run a heavy 100 amp wire over to the house, remove the meter over here. I'll have a breaker to where I can run the shop over here on 100 amps of service. This technically becomes a sub panel then, and I have to go through and separate all my neutrals and grounds. At the same time, that'll be perfectly fine. I can backfeed with this system over here. I'm always going to leave my shop to where I can grid tie. So when I'm out here doing heavy work, heavy 240 volt welding, I'm probably not going to run off this system. But 99% of the time, I'm going in off-grid mode. Now I'm doing something a little different here. You could technically feed these from the grid like I explained, to where if I have low battery or if it's raining like it is right now and I'm not charging my system up, these can automatically pull from the main panel. The problem is you can't backfeed the same panel that you're pulling from. That just does not work. You would need to pull from this panel, set up another sub panel somewhere and feed it and separate neutrals and grounds just like I told you. That way this can truly pull in and output either from the batteries, from solar, or from the grid. I'm doing a unique situation here to where I'm going to have a breaker that I can flip on to allow these to charge the batteries only if I have multiple days of no power. I'm always working from home, I'm always here, so I monitor my system. But this system is starting to get big enough that I can run my shop for a couple of days. So I've got time to come out here and flip these to grid for charging only. And I've done something pretty unique to where I can't have these feed the main panel if I swap the main breaker on here and feed from grid. Let me show you, this will make more sense. So now with my main panel back on, y'all see me install this generator interlock right here. So if I were back feeding this panel, which means I have to flip this breaker on, which is my two hots coming in from my two separate inverters, I physically have to throw off main power to where this is no longer energized from the grid, and then I can flip this on. That's how I'm going to run 99% of the time. So I'm back feeding this panel from these inverters. But in the event that I need to swap these inverters over to the grid just to charge batteries, I'll have to flip them off from feeding the panel, and I can flip back on grid power, and I'll just power the entire shop off of grid power while these are running and charging the batteries. I've kind of made a little bit of a hybrid system here. So why the heck have I done this? I know it seems really confusing. Again, I do a lot of testing. I need different configurations here, way different than the normal homeowner. But the other main reason is because I know this is all temporary. I'm about to remove the meter at a certain point after I build out the system a little larger, get a couple more batteries. We're going to trench around and wire the house, and then I can always flip to grid power from the house in the event that I need to. But what this is allowing me to do is, as I continue to build my system out, as I save money and do so, I'm eventually at times going to need grid power. And I don't want to put an extra sub panel up here and pull all these circuits out and have this huge 200 amp main box over here that's doing nothing more than having one breaker in it to provide power to these, and then I have to physically move everything to another breaker somewhere. It's just a lot of work and money that's not needed. So another important note I want to bring up, you see my spacing here. Plenty of ventilation on this side, however this side looks crammed. If you look underneath, there is a huge gap right there. You do need to give these inverters plenty of ventilation. My situation's a little unique because I have forced ventilation that actually will pull airflow back up through that corner right there. If you did not have that forced ventilation, I would recommend follow the manual, make sure you have adequate spacing on either side, and gap your batteries out. Alright, so I've got my final hookup. Let me show you what we got going on here. There is two communication cables that plug in the bottom here. One can only plug in a certain direction, one in the other, so you can't mess this up. And then I've also got that plugged in down here on the second inverter. As far as my batteries go, just want to let y'all know, this is technically a bus bar on the bottom side of the battery. I have one battery wired up to one inverter, one battery wired up to the other inverter, and then the other two remaining open lugs right here. Combining the two batteries, I have two aught cable running down and connecting here, so both batteries are parallel together. Technically what you should do and what I'm going to do, I have ordered in fuses and an external bus bar, but it is yet to show up, so we're going to test this real quick. What you would normally do is run a positive from this battery to a bus bar right here, positive from that battery to the other, and you'd put an inline fuse in between both of them before they go to the bus bar. Then you'd run one line off the bus bar to the battery, so you're doing external fusing. That is the right way to do that. However, these do come with circuit breakers as well, and these are a protected battery, but most people mount an external fuse block and bus bar instead of using the built-in one right here. Went ahead and powered this battery on. Now they're shared together, and the company informed me that you can do up to 100 amps of charging per battery, and when you tie them together, they have a bypass PCB that'll discharge up to 20 amps of current to the next battery in order to charge it. Now we're going to power this up in off mode. You see this button is not pushed in. In order to set these up to communicate to each other and go to split phase mode, you do not want it on, which means that light is off. You see how there's no light up here now that it powered up? We are in like standby mode. So we're going to press and hold this button down. That carries us to our menu. We're going to go down to menu 28. We're going to hit this button again. Now you see we're flashing. We have our different options. There is for 3-phase setup, like if this was a third inverter. If this was a second inverter, there's 2P1, there's 2P2, 120. So 120 is for 3-phase. I set it up to be 2P2. It's the second inverter, and we did 180 because we're split phase. We're 180 out from the other unit. 120 we would only select if we were going to do 3-phase. We don't really run 3-phase here in the United States unless it's commercial applications. And you can see this unit is charging. We're back to getting enough solar to charge. This is also flashing, so it's bypassing and charging that one as well. It's very cloudy outside, so we're getting very low solar today. We don't have any grid input power coming to these because the breakers are off. Let's go ahead and kill shut power and let's flip on this double pole 50 amp breaker and go completely off grid and see if this works. I'm nervous. All right, so here we go. We'll kill the main power. And we are now running on the inverters. The good news is the lights came back on. I don't hear nothing smoking, popping, and cracking. We're showing 600 watts of output on this model and 1.71 kilowatts of output on this particular model. That's a lot of power. I need to balance my phases. And by balancing phases, what that means is I'm gonna have to see which one of these breakers has the majority of load on it and swap it down one, put it on a different phase. That way one inverter is not doing the majority of the work. Let's check some voltages. I have some 240 volt plugs in the shop and then obviously 120s here. Let's see what kind of power we're getting.
And for those of you that are curious, we're staying 59.9 to 60 hertz, so right in the range where we need to be, and holding a steady 119.3 volts. So far so good.
All right, y'all should be able to see the voltage here, and I'm going to bring up a 240 volt welding plug and let's see what we've got. All right, 238 volts. That's very close to 240. I'm happy with that. And that means we're getting our split phase. Something else I just forgot. I'm charging this unit at 1800 watts, so no wonder these have got such a heck of a load on them. Didn't even think about that. All right, so let's do a quick heavy test. This is a 240 volt compressor. It'll need both phases. I'm gonna blow some air off, make it kick on. It's gonna get really loud, but let's make sure everything works like it should. All right, let's try this again without thousands of watts of extra load running. Okay, that was the problem. Wow. 1700 watts it was just at. Now it's down to 1200. 2000 watts, now down to wow, look at that way that is cycling. 800 watts up to over 2000 watts. Now the good news is the compressor doesn't run long, but as you can see, it's got a relatively large motor on it. Oh wow, okay, I see it now. 13 amps at 230 volts. Holy smokes. Yeah, that's way more powerful than I realized. So that's one of the most powerful things that I guess I have right there, and it's got a heck of a surge. I'll just have to keep that in mind in the future as I run things in the shop. The good news is I've got 13,000 available watts here. Everything else in the shop doesn't pull a fraction of that amount. All right, so it's worth mentioning, I see exactly what happened right there when I just kicked on that very heavy load. First of all, I'm blown away. That compressor is pulling far more power than I ever realized. It's pulling as much as a dryer does in a home, and it's got a heck of an initial surge startup. So all that amperage at 230 volts that I just told you is thousands of watts to run that thing. And I see the other problem. I have an imbalanced panel, and I kind of already knew that. It's something we may cover in an upcoming episode. So long story short, this inverter right here is doing almost all the work for the entire shop, from my shop lights, my fans, and most importantly, my processing room that has all the freezers and refrigerators. This one down here is hardly outputting any power. So all that means is I need to go on my panel, move some breakers around to the phase that this one's on, and I'll move some wall outlets and other things and balance my load. So when I tried to kick on that compressor a minute ago, this one was already outputting so much power running the rest of the shop. Well, whenever that initial surge hit, this is the unit that tripped, and I see why. It had thousands upon thousands of watts it was trying to output. And these are 6,500 watt inverters. I probably went over that seeing the surge and pull that compressor has. Actually, I know I did. That's why it tripped. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. So I think once we go through and balance out the panel, I'll probably have a much better success rate of running the entire shop and kicking the compressor on at the same time. That's why balancing your panel, balancing your loads is so important. So again, please keep in mind all this is temporary as I build out my system. We're eventually going to be taking the shop completely off grid, although technically it's off grid right now. And I think I'm going to be able to continue to run this around the clock on all but many rainy days. Once we have multiple rainy days or cloudy days, I may have to swap over to grid power, run the shop off of that while I charge my batteries up. But at least I have the option to do that. I think by far the majority of the time, this system is going to run my shop. Now what's going to truly take me off grid in the future, maybe a little more solar panels outside, and I'm going to try to get 2 more batteries as I save up a little more money there. That'll get me up to 20 kilowatt hours of capacity, and we may go even further than that in the future, especially if we're going to tie the house over here. We're going to need a considerable amount more power to do that. Don't forget, this whole system is truly for backup and emergency use for us. That's what I'm building it for. But the cool thing about this versus a generator is a generator sits outside and waits for the emergency. This I can go ahead and be using, reducing my electric bill every month. I'm curious to see how that's going to be over the next couple of months. And it can make power for me all day long. Why not? I've already got the money invested in it. Then if that emergency or power outage does hit, I already have the system ready to go to serve basically like a generator in that backup power supply that I'm looking for. All right, hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. We've got a lot more solar stuff coming. I've dove in head first with it at the request of you, the viewers. Don't forget, links are down in the description. I bought this new equipment right here, but if you do go down and purchase that link, I do earn a small commission, and that helps me save up and earn money to buy more equipment like this. Thank y'all so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode.